Hello, this is Pastor Doug McCoy from the West Side Christian Church. I want to thank you for watching one of our recent messages here online. Also want to extend an invitation to you to join us in person. We do gather as a group physically in person at a place called the Makoy Center in Hilliard. It's right behind the Crooked Can, right off of Main Street. Usually we're there at 10 a.m., but you may want to check our calendar before you come. Sometimes we are on the move. When we're there at the Makoy, this is what you can expect. We all come in 9:30, 10 o'clock. We greet one another, we fellowship, spend some time, talk a little bit, get to know each other, encourage, comfort each other if need be. 10 o'clock, we start our service. We have some songs, a few announcements. Sometimes we take communion to remember the sacrifice and the resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. We may take up a free will offering where people contribute to God's work financially as they feel led. And then we have a message very much like the one that you are about to watch here today. Usually we spend about an hour together. We depart with smiles, hugs, handshakes, all those wonderful things, because we are trying to be a family doing God's mission together. If that sounds good to you, we would love to have you. Once again, that's 10 a.m. at the Makoy Center, West Side Christian Church. Look forward to meeting you. Is Christmas over? No, yeah. In the store, it's over. Valentine's has now taken the place of Christmas in Target, okay? But according to tradition, it's really just started. Christmas is going to continue all the way up till January 5th or January 6th, so it is not over. Second question, did you get enough? Yeah. Oh, okay. I was hoping the answer would be no. Okay. I didn't get enough. I wasn't dissatisfied, but I wasn't entirely satisfied either. You know, that's what it's like being an introvert. People think being an introvert means that you can't conduct yourself with people. That's not what it means. It means that I'm constantly evaluating my resources. Christmas is a resource. I love these special days. And so all Thursday and all Friday, I was saying, I don't think I'm going to get enough. I don't think I'm going to get enough. So I didn't get enough. And I hope that you could still use a little more, because I got a little more for you this morning. Just one more. We did 4 messages throughout December. And I guess the last Sunday, November too, where we looked at Christmas carols, what I called classic Christmas carols, and we saw certain truths about Jesus that those carols communicated. We did Adeste Fideles, O Come All Ye Faithful, which was Word of the Father now in flesh appearing. We did O Come Emmanuel, which was Desired of All Nations. We did Hark the Herald Angels Sing, which was, help me out here, anybody remember?
Silent.
Oh my goodness. I had it a minute ago. Okay, it was something. And then it'll come to me eventually. And then we did Silent Night, which was Love's Pure Light, right? Hark the Herald Angels. Son of Righteousness rising with healing in his wings. That's the hard one. Thank you very much. So, but we knew all the way back in the summer we were going to do that. Sam and I sat down. I said, this is what I want to do. I love these carols. I've never talked about them. I want to talk about the carols. I want to bring out the truth. I had a list of 6 or 7. I knew that was too much. I thought 4 was pushing it. So we cut it down to 4. There were some that I hated to see go, but there was one I really didn't want to let go. And I decided, I think we could do that the day after Christmas, the Sunday after Christmas. I think it would still be appropriate. So with your permission, if you can take a little bit, can you at least take a little bit more for 20 more minutes? Yeah. Okay, so if you could take another 20 minutes of Christmas, with your permission, I want to go back to this last classic Christmas carol and the truth about Jesus it communicates to us. This Christmas carol is called We Three Kings. You might know it as classic Christmas carols go. It is on the younger side still. Silent Night was pretty young. It was first done in 1818. That's when it was composed and performed. So it's just a little over 200 years old. We Three Kings was written in 1857, which makes it less than 200 years old. So it's fairly young as these things go. It was written in America, which is unique. Most of these characters, classic Christmas carols, were written in England or in Europe. This one was written in Pennsylvania by an Episcopal priest, and it was written for a Christmas parade that was going to be held in New York City. Now, why New York City needed a Pennsylvania priest to write their song for them, I don't know. What I do know is that the song is based on the biblical story, the biblical account of the visit of the wise men or the Magi. And I actually want to start with that scriptural story before we turn to the Christmas carol. You find this story in Matthew chapter 2. Matthew's the only one who records it for us. The Spirit only gave us this one time in the Gospels. I gave you verses 9 through 11 in your notes, but I want to go back really to the beginning, verse 1 of chapter 2, and just read a couple verses there. Matthew says this. He says, "After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east." Now, we don't know really who these guys are. You can call them Magi, you can call them wise men, you can call them kings. Historically, we've called them three things. More than likely, they were some sort of scholars or maybe astrologers. Which is the right one? Because there's astrology and astronomy, and I can't tell the difference. I think astronomy is they were astronomers or scholars who could, identify things in the sky. Some people have said they are Persians, but others say, no, they're the descendants of the Jewish people who didn't return to Israel after the Babylonian exile, which I think is a possibility. We don't know for sure. But in any case, they came from the east to Jerusalem, and they asked King Herod, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews?" That is Jesus. "We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." So then they have a little exchange with Herod there, and we drop down to verse 9. Verse 9 says, "After the wise men, the Magi, had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route." So that's Matthew's account of the Magi, the story of the visit of the wise men or the kings. We Three Kings retells that story. And it not only retells that story, but it does so brilliantly. There is a structure to that Christmas carol. Now, if you've been with me for a while, you know that I love structure, that it's not enough for me to just say, hey, this verse says this. I'm always looking for the structure of the biblical book. I'm looking for the structure of the Bible itself. I'm looking for the structure of the passage. I believe that structure communicates truth. Well, there is a structure to We Three Kings, a real clear one. I think most songs probably have a loose structure. We Three Kings has a very clear and solid structure. I remember being a teenager just down the road here at my home church and looking through a hymnal at Christmas time and seeing We Three Kings and discovering this structure for myself. 5 parts to it. There's 5 verses, so there's 5 parts. The first verse is an introduction. It's just catching us up on the story. We Three Kings of Orient or the East are bearing gifts. We traverse afar, field and fountain, moor and mountain, following yonder star. So it's just telling us the basic story. It's introducing us to the idea. The next 3 verses is one of the 3 kings, or at least one of the 3 gifts. A king talks about his gift, the next king talks about his gift, and the last king talks about his gift. So that's the middle 3 verses. And then in the final verse, we get a conclusion. In fact, I would say it's not even a conclusion so much as it is an interpretation. They have told us the story in the first 4 books, and now this priest who wrote this for us, now he tells us what the story means, what is being signified, what is being communicated there. He does that in the first part of the 5th verse. He says this, maybe you know these words, maybe you don't. Here's what he gives us. "Glorious now, behold him arise." So with that line, he's saying, we've arrived. Now we're here with Jesus. We see him, or we behold him, and they say he is arising, which I think is a beautiful verb. Never in my life have I ever arose. Okay, I will never arise in your life. You may run into me one day. all right? But I'm never going to arise. But Jesus is arising, and they say he's glorious. And then they add this line here, and this is the key line: King and God and sacrifice. Glorious now, behold, Jesus arise. He is King and God and sacrifice. That is the truth that this classic Christmas carol is giving us, the truth about Jesus. It is communicating to us. I think in some sense, it is one truth. It feels like one truth to me. But I can't put that into words, and I can't communicate to you today how it's one truth. I just feel that it is. I do see three distinct ideas, though, in this truth. And if you want to say three different truths, well, we can say that as well. So we either have three distinct ideas or we have three truths about Jesus that are kind of equal. They're all about what he does, who he is, the role that he is playing in human history. I want to go through each of them there this morning as our message. We'll start with what's probably the easiest one and the first one in the carol, and that is King. Now, Jesus being King, that is explicitly stated here in Matthew chapter 2. When the wise men, when the Magi come to Herod, they say, we're looking for the one who was born King of the Jews. So they not only say he's a king, but they also say he's a hereditary king. He wasn't made king. He was born that way. He was blue blood. He inherited it just by being his birth. So very clearly it is stated here that Jesus is king. This is stated throughout the Bible as well. He's called king. He's called Lord, which I think is largely a synonym, even though it has more spiritual connotation perhaps. And he is called ruler as well. So this is stated throughout the scriptures. It is represented both in Matthew chapter 2 and in this classic Christmas carol, We Three Kings. It's represented by the gift of gold. And we see that in verse 2 of the carol. I gave that to you in your notes. Verse 2 says, "Born a king on Bethlehem's plain, gold I bring to crown him again, king forever, ceasing never, over us all to reign." So very clearly, the composer of the song, the author of the song says Jesus is a king. He was born a king in Bethlehem, exactly what the scriptures say. And we're bringing gold to him because he is king. We're bringing gold to him to crown him, to coronate him as king. Beautiful idea, I think. I imagine all of us instinctively, immediately know it is beautiful. There is a slight problem with this idea, though, at least for us Americans. And what's the problem? Well, we don't like kings. That's absolutely right. And I'm going to be first in line for that. Okay. If you say, Doug, do you like kings? Absolutely not. Okay. I'm red, white, and blue, baby. We threw off kings for a reason. I don't think we should return. If you ask me, what's a king? What does that word signify? It's going to be negative. My immediate sense about that word is that it has negative connotations. If you say name a king, first guy I'm probably going to name is Henry VIII, who, is well known for killing his wives. Next guy might be George III, who, oppressed the American colonies, taxation without representation. I might go biblical. I might say King Herod. He was somebody said so King Herod's a puppet king. He didn't earn it. He shouldn't have had it. Rome just needed somebody, so Rome put him on the throne, and Rome controlled him. But he was a pretty awful guy, and one of the Romans said one time, it's better to be his pig than his son, because he tried to keep the Jewish customs, so he wouldn't eat pork. He would not kill a pig. He killed like 2 of his sons and 1 of his wives, I think. So terrible, terrible example of kingship. And then, King Ahab from the Old Testament, that's probably going to come up as well. Those are what I think of when you say the word king to me. I think of somebody who has amassed to himself a great deal of wealth and luxury. He's got robes, he's got jewelry, he's got a crown and a throne and a palace and a castle and a turkey leg that he eats every now and then. That's what I'm going to think of when you say king. You probably think the same way. There's an aspect of kingship, though, something real kings do, good kings do, and there have been good kings throughout history. There's something that a good king does that I think we Americans might have missed. And I would just put it very simply. I would just say a good king sets things right. Yeah. When things have gone wrong and nobody else can fix them, that's when you need a king, because a king has power, a king has authority, a king doesn't need to ask anybody for permission, so he can go in there and he can make things right, he can set things straight. This is what we see biblically in my favorite Old Testament book of history. It's not my favorite book of the Bible, it's my favorite Old Testament book of history, the book of Judges. Remember, we had the Exodus, they come out of Egypt, we have Joshua, they conquer the promised land, they take residence in it, and then we have Judges, which is people now trying to survive in the promised land. And the book of Judges tells us repeatedly the problem was there was no king. Anybody know the rest of the line? And everybody did what they wanted to do, what was right in their own eyes. It was might makes right. Yep. If you're stronger than the people around you, then you can do whatever you want to do. Nobody can stop you. They needed a king. Eventually they got the covenant king, David. David set things straight. We see this in literature as well. You're familiar with King Arthur. I guess his story is told in multiple movies and books. My favorite is called The Once and Future King. I don't know if you're familiar with that one or not. And I can't remember, I don't remember if he pulls the sword out of the stone in that one or if the lady in the lake gives him the sword. It happens both ways, but he is made king. The Romans had vacated Britain and it had fallen into chaos. Now it's just a bunch of tribes warring again. Who's strongest? They're going to do what they want to do. The lady in the lake, the stone, they give Arthur the sword. Merlin comes in and educates him a little bit, instructs him. Finally, Arthur says, hey, I don't think it ought to be who's strongest anymore. I think there ought to be law and order. And Merlin says, thank God, pretty literally in The Once and Future King, he says, thank God you finally got it. And Arthur does set things in order. And then the legend is, when the book ends, the legend is that one day he might come back and set things straight again. That's why he's called the once, the past, and the future king, because he could come back and he could straighten out Britain once more. Some of you are Lord of the Rings fans. We see the same thing in Lord of the Rings, written by a Christian brother. J.R.R. Tolkien was a devout follower, believer in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. If you've seen the movies, you know that at the end, Aragorn is crowned king, and yeah, I guess that's a good ending. Makes sense. But I guess in the books, there's something we don't see in the movie. After he becomes king, he goes on a tour of the territory. And he starts fixing things. He takes the hobbits were the little people, and he says no big people can come into hobbit territory. It belongs expressly to them. So he protects the hobbits. There are also these wild people. I think in the extended version of the movies, you might see one scene with the wild people. He does the same thing. Their forest is their forest. Nobody else is allowed to go into it. He establishes the southern border. So the people they had been fighting with, he says, don't come into our territory anymore. We won't come into yours. It's a little strict, but it's the best thing for everybody. So he sets the border there. So he goes on a tour as king, and he makes everything right. And that is exactly what Jesus, the perfect king, has come and done as well. Jesus has come and he has established law and order. And again, I know that we have this thing called law, and Paul speaks a lot about not being saved by law. So that is a truth. But Paul also says that there's a law of Christ, that Christ gave us another law, not to be saved by, but so that we could live in harmony with each other. He mentions this in 1 Corinthians. He mentions this in Galatians. He says there is a law of Christ. Some people think, and I'm not sure, but it's a possibility. Some people think that Matthew records 5 sermons that Jesus delivered. The Sermon on the Mount, the Sermon on Parables, Sermon on the Mount is 5 through 7, Sermon on Parables, chapter 13, the missionary sermon in, I think that's chapter 10, if I'm not mistaken. The Olivet Discourse, 24 and 25, and then what I call the Kingdom Spirit sermon in chapter 18. That he has these 5 long sermons, and that Matthew purposefully put them in there to say, The law of Moses, the 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, is now replaced by the 5 law sermons of Jesus, that Jesus has come in as a new Moses and given us a new law. Now, I don't know if that's 100% true, but I know the idea is true. Jesus has come in and set things straight. He's made things right. Things were neglected for a time, as they were in Britain, as they were in the time of Judges, as they were in Middle Earth. Things have been neglected and they've fallen into disrepair. Jesus has come back in. He set them straight. Gold symbolizes a king who sets things straight, who makes things right, who fixes things. The Magi brought him gold. The wise men brought him gold because they knew he was king. That's the first truth, the first idea we have here. Second, does get a little more difficult, I think, and that is God. Now, Matthew does not directly state that Jesus is God here. It is implied twice, though, in the text. We are told first, when the wise men approach Herod, they say, we want to worship him. And then second, when they see Jesus, they do worship him. Now, you don't worship a king. You can honor a king. You can respect a king. You may bow out of honor and respect to a king, but you don't worship a king. Who do you worship? You worship God and God alone. These guys would have known that. We know that today. So the fact that they worship Jesus tells us what? That he is God. And the author of this classic Christmas carol, We Three Kings, he brings that out. It's represented in this gift of frankincense, which is the subject of the third verse there, the second gift. Here's what he says. It's in your notes. Frankincense to offer have I. Incense owns a deity, God, nigh. Prayer and praising, all men raising. And if it wasn't clear enough, he says it. Worship him, Jesus, who is God on high. So frankincense represents God. Jesus is God. Now, this may be a little difficult for us for 2 reasons. One is that we don't know what frankincense is. And this has been a problem all of my life. And in fact, I don't know why, but a lot of people seem to have confused frankincense with Frankenstein. And I've got a series of, look at these are comic strips, okay? There's the one, he brought Frankenstein, and the guy says, no, it was supposed to be frankincense. I got another one here for you. I can't read that from where we are. What's it say? Yeah, what on earth is that? We've got gold and myrrh. What did you bring? So same thing. Then we got a third one here. There he's bring. I don't know why this is so popular. I thought for sure there was a Far Side by Gary Larson that was about this. There wasn't, but there was this one, and I'm just giving it to you free. This doesn't mean anything to our message today. But he says, unbeknownst to most theologians, there was a fourth wise man who was turned away for bringing fruitcake. And I thought that was funny. And if you've ever had fruitcake, I mean, man, I'm not a fruitcake. Figgy pudding either. Have you ever had figgy pudding? Oh my goodness, it tastes like sweet, wet, stovetop stuffing. Don't ever. Heather and I went to a dinner, they're like, figgy pudding? No, never want that stuff again. Okay, so we don't seem to understand what frankincense is. Really, it's just it's incense. And if you look at the NIV, it's just incense with the word frank in front of it for some reason. They dropped the frank and they just gave us incense. Incense was used in the tabernacle that Moses built, in the temple that David prepared for and Solomon built, in the new temple that the post-exilic Israelites built. They burned incense constantly as a way of representing prayer to God, communication with God, interaction with God. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm right, I'm going off memory here, but I think in Luke 1, when Zechariah is met by the angel and told that Elizabeth will bear John the Baptist, I believe he's offering incense, isn't he? So that was his job as priest for the day, to go into the holy place and offer incense to God. So it is connected with God and with the worship of God. So that's the first difficulty that we're going to have there. We don't understand frankincense. The second difficulty that we've had for 2,000 years is that it's difficult for us to understand how Jesus is God, or how Jesus is man in God, how he is God with us, Emmanuel, how he is God in the flesh. All these phrases that we use is how they are three in one. We've struggled with this for centuries, and particularly in the early centuries. There were several problems that the early Christians tried to work out with this. One of them was, I believe, 325 AD. They met in Nicaea and they were discussing this. And there was a guy there named Arius, and he said that Jesus was created, which John very clearly says in John 1 that Jesus was not, that in the beginning he was with God, that he was always there alongside the Father. But Arius was saying, no, if he's the Son of God, he has to be created somehow. There was a bishop from Myrrh who was arguing with Arius. His name was Nicholas, which you might shorten to Nick. And eventually they canonized him and made him a saint, which would make him Saint Nick. Are you on the same page with me? Okay. He got so frustrated with Arius, as Arius kept saying that Jesus was created, Jesus was created, Jesus was created. He eventually walked across the floor and decked him. He flattened him with a punch. I don't think that should be happening in church meetings. Won't be happening in our meeting on the 11th, so please come, because there won't be any punching there. But I got to tell you, that's my kind of Santa Claus. I mean, I want a Santa Claus who punches heretics. That's what. So yeah, we have difficulty understanding, and I can't explain it. And I don't even try to explain it. It's stated clearly. I simply accept it. God does not expect me to be able to understand and explain everything. He expects me to believe what he says. And so I believe what he says when he says Jesus is his son and is completely divine as well as completely human. I do know why this is important, though, and I can understand a lot of people saying, this is just one of your points of theology that you guys like to argue and punch each other over, and it really doesn't make much difference. It makes a huge difference. It's very important that Jesus be God. Real quickly, I want to tell you 3 reasons why this is so. The first is that if Jesus were merely human, then we could ignore him. Now, remember what I said about being a king. A king comes and sets things right. He has authority and power to set things right. When I'm dealing with a fellow human, though, even if they're intelligent, even if they're educated, even if they've figured something out correctly, I can still say, yeah, I don't care. You're just a guy like me. I don't care. I was, this week, my news feed gave me a quote by Socrates. He said, strong minds talk about ideas, average minds talk about events, weak minds talk about people. I said, yeah, I think that's true. I'm going to accept that. Okay. Then it gave me some quote from Lao Tzu, who I think is an Asian philosopher, and it was about becoming your true self or something. I said, yeah, I don't care. And I moved on, And then Augustine said something again. I was like, yeah, I don't care. We can dismiss other men. Even if they're right, we can dismiss other men because they are men, right? Because they're equal. They're on the same plane as us. And even if they're correct, I can just say, yeah, I don't see it that way. And I can walk away. You can't dismiss God. Okay, remember they used to have those billboards, God Speaks, and it was just black background with white text, and one of them said, that love your neighbor thing, I meant that, God. You can't dismiss God the way you can dismiss man. So the only way he's going to work as king is if he is also God. Second reason this is important, if Jesus was human, only human, what that really means is that we saved ourselves. Okay, Jesus came to bring salvation, and the way of life that he preached, those 5 sermons that Matthew records and the other sermons we find in Luke and in Mark and in John, that was part of that salvation. Here's how to live better. Here's how to live in harmony with each other and not do damage to each other. If that didn't come from God, then it just came from a man. And if it just came from a man, what does that mean? He just figured it out. And all we're doing is following one guy who figured it out. It's not that God came and saved us, which is what we see repeatedly in the Christmas story. When the angel appears to Joseph, when the angel appears to Mary, when the angel appears to Zacharias. You remember Zacharias says, God has raised up a horn of salvation. I love that line. I prayed that line at least 20 times this Christmas season from Luke chapter 1. Salvation from our enemies and from the hands of all who hate us. But if Jesus was just a man, that didn't happen. It wasn't God's salvation at all. It was our salvation. We just figured things out. pretty ugly. Even worse, though, third, if Jesus isn't God, then God doesn't love us. Okay, John 3:16, we can all quote it. Not a Christmas passage, is it? Well, it kind of talks about Jesus coming, Jesus being sent, Jesus being given. But what does it tell us? For God so loved the world that he gave as a gift his one and only Son. If Jesus was human, that didn't happen. He just figured things out. God didn't give us anything. If God didn't give us anything, what might that mean?
We don't have any hope.
We don't have any hope. God doesn't like us that much. God does. Again, we figured it out ourselves. He wasn't involved. He might not care about us. So I don't know how you feel about that. I feel all three of those possibilities are ugly. Okay, that we can dismiss what we've been told, that it was just us who figured it out, that God doesn't like us or love us. I think that's a pretty ugly reality. That's completely opposite to the reality that all of us have been living in all of our lives. We've all lived in this different reality that God loved us and gave Jesus to come and save us. If he's not God, none of that is true. Fortunately, it is true because he is God. And that's what the wise men understood. Incense represents God. The wise men brought Jesus incense because he is God. And then the last idea that we have here, and this is the different one, this is where things turn, is the idea of sacrifice. I don't think Matthew states the idea of sacrifice here in Matthew chapter 2. He will in other parts of his gospel. I'm not even sure he implies it. It is represented, though, in that gift of myrrh. Again, I don't know that we know what myrrh is any more than we know what frankincense is. But in the fourth verse of the Christmas carol, We Three Kings, he describes it for us. He says, "Myrrh is mine, its bitter perfume breathes a life of gathering gloom, sorrowing, sighing, bleeding, dying, sealed in the stone-cold tomb." So what's he referring to there? Jesus' death. Myrrh was used back in that time when they didn't have the embalming practices that we have today, that, which is most of human history. Those practices are recent. Back in that time, they had this perfume. I don't know what it looked like. I don't know if it was liquid or solid or paste or whatever, but they would put it on a dead person to preserve them a little bit long enough to be able to bury them. Now, I don't know that this myrrh was saved for all of Jesus' life and used at his burial, but we do know that he was anointed like this for his burial twice, in fact. Mary anointed his feet while he was still living during the Passion Week, and from what I understand, those who know these things, they tell me that would have stayed on him. You would have been able to smell that on him all throughout the arrest and the trials and the beating and the execution, and then all the way to the burial, that you would have known, you could have smelled that she did that. But then after the execution, who also prepared him, who also anointed him that way? Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea, they got his body from the Romans and they prepared. So we know that this myrrh was used in Jesus' burial. We know then that it represents his death. We know further that his death was a sacrificial death. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional. It wasn't just something that would happen. It was something that happened for a reason. I'm not sure we always understand what that reason is, though. And I'm going to do the best I can to explain it right now, real briefly. We'll probably talk about more as we come into Easter. But the reason is that anytime you have sin, if you want to have the spiritual connotation, or even if you just have crime, just put it in legal terms, there is a price. There's damage that has been done, and that damage must be resolved somehow. That price must be paid. I'll give you an example. When I left for Cincinnati in 1998, my parents moved up to Mount Gilead, and they bought 40 acres up there, and Dad wanted a barn. Now, we never called it the barn. We called it the building. I'm not exactly sure why, but he wanted a barn. He wanted this building. And he hired this local builder to build it for him, and Mom and Dad gave him $10,000 in advance to build the building. Well, they waited and they waited and waited, and the building was never built. And eventually they got a call from somebody else in the area, and they said, hey, did you hire this guy to build a building? Yeah, we did. Well, I did too, and he hasn't come and done anything. And so a group of them finally found out about each other. They got together, several people who had given this guy several thousands of dollars to go and build their buildings for them, and he just didn't do it. So they filed a lawsuit. They took this guy into court. The prosecutor was there. The prosecutor spoke to the judge, and the judge finally said, well, this is what we've determined. He's just a bad businessman. This isn't a crime. He just doesn't know how to do business very well, and we're going to let him go. And all those people were like, well, what about our tens of thousands of dollars? And the judge was like, so apparently he got to keep the money. I mean, I don't know what happened to him after that, but apparently he kept all that money and did none of that work. Now, all of us immediately know what? That was wrong. Okay, if the guy didn't want to build the building, fine. But what should he have done? Given the money back. We would have let him walk, right? He kept the money. We lost the money. There was damage done. There was a price that needed to be paid. It is the same with our sin, which is always against each other, always against God. Every sin is, I've damaged you in some way, shape, or form. Do you want to live with that damage? You'd rather something be done about it, wouldn't you? Yeah. Same with me. People have damaged me. I'd like something to be done about it. Who's going to do something about it? Jesus decided to. Jesus said, yep, I know damage has been done. Yep, I know a debt has been incurred. I know there's a price that has been paid. I know they can't pay it. So I'm going to go pay it myself. And then things will be right once again. Then they'll be in harmony with each other. Then they'll be in harmony with God. Painful truth. I don't know that there's anybody that loves the crucifixion, right? Painful truth, but necessary. And Jesus did it. Myrrh represents a sacrifice. The wise men, the Magi, gave myrrh to Jesus because they knew he would be that sacrifice. So every time I brought you one of these Christmas carols, I told you something unique about it. And there's not much that's unique about We Three Kings, really. I mean, it's American, which is kind of unique. Most of them, as I said, are European or English. I didn't think that was super exciting. One thing I did think was neat, though, was a quote that I read about this song, and I put it there in your notes, just a portion of it. There was one person that said, We Three Kings is unique because it takes us all the way through Advent to Epiphany. And to understand that, you have to, again, understand how the ancient people, the people before us, did Christmas. They didn't do it the way we did, where there's a big, big buildup from Thanksgiving Day, and then Christmas Day is wonderful, and then it's over. They had Advent for 6 weeks, which was waiting. Then they had Christmas for 12 days, which was celebrating. Then they had Epiphany on the last day, which is the visit of the wise men. And then how does the wise men's story end? They go home. They leave. The season is over and a new season takes its place. We lump all that together and just call it Christmas, but the ancient people saw it as 3 separate things. The ancient people saw it as a journey. And this classic Christmas carol takes us on that journey. It takes us through the Advent to the Christmas, ending with the Epiphany and the journey home. And as I looked at that this week, I thought, that's exactly what God is doing with us. God is calling us to take a journey. Christmas is, for all intents and purposes, over. At least the way that we celebrate. Now, if you want to keep it going till January 5th, you can. We won't be talking about it next Sunday, but if you're still celebrating, you go ahead and celebrate. But for all intents and purposes, Christmas is over. I wish it wasn't. I didn't think I got enough. Okay, yeah, I did. Not enough presents. I didn't need You guys, by the way, I have plenty of screwdrivers now. I need to watch my mouth when I'm preaching because I do not need a new screwdriver anymore. Thank you. I don't mean that I got enough gifts. I mean, I didn't get enough of the holiday. I didn't get enough of family and really even God during the holiday. I would like to stay here. That's where I want to be. And God says, no, Doug, it's going to be January. It's time to get back on the camel. Time to get back to work. Eventually, we're going to hit Lent. And then we're going to hit Good Friday. And then we're going to hit Resurrection Sunday. And then the cycle will start all over again. God is calling me to go on this journey that I really don't want to go on because that's where his kingdom is going. That's where his son is going. That's where his work is going to take place. And he's calling you to go on that same journey as well. We're going to go on it whether we want to or not, right? January's coming. I like the Myrrh months. I don't like the airy months. The Myrrh months or the airy months are coming, okay? Whether we like it or not. So we're gonna go on this journey one way or the other. God is inviting us now to voluntarily go on this journey wherever it is that star leads us, whatever labor it leads us into. And so my final Christmas prayer for you, my wish for you this Christmas season is that you will go on that journey with the wise men and with me. I've said, yes, God, I understand where you're leading me and I don't want to go, but I'm going to go. So my prayer for you is that you will likewise say, yep, we understand that it's time to go. We're going to go. My prayer for you this Christmas season is that you will behold him arise as glorious as he is. My prayer for you this Christmas season is that you will see Jesus and be driven by Jesus, be fueled by Jesus, be encouraged by Jesus as King and God and sacrifice. Hey, it's me again. Wanted to thank you a second time for watching, spending this time with us. We really appreciate it. We would love you to be connected with us. We would love to get connected with you. Several ways you can do that. You can go to our website, find all sorts of information and a Connect card to get involved there. You can also find us on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram. Look us up. You will find us Westside Christian Church in Columbus, Ohio. Again, love to be connected with you. Love to get to know you. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again.